Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everything in between. A few caveats before we crack on, okay? I am increasingly in my autumnal years, which means I can't stand technology because I'm so old, okay? It's official, it's a legal requirement. So you'll have to bear with me. I'm not the best at using high tech, so I've done this to the best of my ability, but you will have to bear with me. Also, it's about a 20-minute video, so if you're sitting comfortably, we will, of course, now crack on. This is a story about David and Goliath. There's nothing necessarily biblical about it other than that, but this is about how me, yours truly, sued an appalling company called Halfords twice, and won twice with no legal experience whatsoever. But more importantly, I guess, it's about that company there. If you're a UK resident, you've all heard about Chris Boardman, and that's his company. Now, again, I'm a guy of the 70s. It is a legal requirement that I cannot stand taglines, but I'm going to draw your attention to that tagline, performance design, and that word there, quality. Now, a few years ago, I went to Halfords, which I believe is the only retailer that sells Boardman bicycles. But that there is the type of bike that I bought. I bought a Boardman Road Team Carbon. And again, it was that word there, and I'm not just saying this, it's that word there that got me interested into buying this bicycle. As any modern consumer tries these days as best they can, I did a bit of research. I'd never owned a carbon bicycle before. So I went online. Now, Bike Radar is a fairly ubiquitous online resource. They're a journalistic output, I think. But this is what Bike Radar said about the Boardman Road Team Carbon being sold at Halfords. They said it was a Bike of the Year contender. Class-leading spec, check it out. But look, they also said, Bike Radar, that the Boardman Road Team Carbon had a quality frame. And again, I'm going to emphasise that information there. They said it had a quality frame. Well, of course, that was pretty much it. That clinched the deal for me. Off I went. I thought my mates would be green with envy, and I went off and purchased a Boardman Road Team bicycle. I loved it. I instantly fell in love with it. It felt like plastic, it weighed as much as plastic, but apparently it's as strong as steel. 'Tis carbon fibre, don't you know? So within a few short weeks I'd started buying additional bits of carbon fibre to attach to my carbon fibre, Road Team carbon fibre road bicycle that I bought from Halfords. And here we can see a carbon fibre bottle cage. Here we can see a rear 100mm deep section carbon fibre wheel, because I was going to get into time trials. It wasn't long before my Boardman bike had so much carbon on it that the retail, if I had to insure it, I would have had to insure it for 3 times what I paid. Here we can see again a pair of deep section wheels, 50mm front and back, that I went off and bought with titanium hubs and skewers. Okay, so a very, very expensive bicycle now with so much carbon on it. Okay, so just bear with me. I think that was me now playing a video of me going quite quickly downhill on my new Boardman Road Team Carbon bicycle. I'm doing this via PowerPoint, so I don't think it's going to sync necessarily, but hopefully you've just seen a quick video of me on my new bicycle enjoying myself. Not long after that video was taken, that's me on my first Sport Eve, happy chappy, and that's me finishing that same Sport Eve, okay? It chucked it down towards the end, but I was still a happy chappy. I really had a good time, alright? Not long after I bought my my Boardman Road Team Carbon bicycle, I was so impressed with it that I actually went out and bought another Boardman bicycle. This time it was an aluminium hydroformed hardtail mountain bike. However, there were a few problems. As soon as I got the bicycle out of the car and took it for a jolly down to the end of the road and back, the suspension bottomed out. Even in 2nd or 3rd gear, putting a bit of welly down, the suspension bottomed out, so I wasn't very impressed with that. It was very apparent that the front derailleur hadn't been sorted out by the mechanics before the bicycle had been sold to me. because it made more noise than a piece of Victorian machinery, okay? It was really clunky. And indeed, the rear derailleur, when it was in first gear, it struck the spokes, okay? So I got it back to the house, straddled the rear of the bicycle with my spanner to try and sort the derailleur out, and I noticed a severe manufacturing defect with the bicycle. And I'm going to say that word again. I noticed a severe, quote-unquote, manufacturing defect with the bicycle. There was a thick piece of aluminium missing from the rear seat stay. I reckon about 40% depth was missing over about a 2-inch linear space on the rear stay, okay? It had been painted over, but it was quite apparent that there was a chunk of, a large-ish chunk of metal missing from the bicycle, okay? What about that word there, you know? A bit disappointing really, isn't it? This bicycle should have been rejected at the factory. These things are made in China. It should have been rejected. Moreover, it should have been rejected at the store, the Halfords store, surely, because those guys, those mechanics carry out a pre-sale QA check. Okay, at least that's what we're told, right? They carry out a quality control approved process to make sure that when customers take their bicycles away from the store, those bicycles are in tip-top condition. But it's all a load of bollocks. Of course, I was given a QA sheet with the bicycle. It was folded under the seat. But it was very, very obvious that that was literally a tick box exercise, because there was defects with the bicycle and it clearly hadn't been set up prior to me purchasing it. I called Halfords customer service and I wanted my money back, with the poor setup, but also with the fact that there was a quite apparent manufacturing defect. This is what Halfords will have you believe happens when you call them. For anyone that's called Halfords customer service, this is the reality, okay? I was so disappointed that I actually contacted Chris Boardman and his company, all right? Again, emphasising that word there, appalling manufacturing defects. I actually contacted Boardman themselves. In fact, look, hello Chris, that's Chris Boardman himself. Complete with medal from the Queen, Chris Boardman MBE. But unfortunately, Mr. Boardman and his corporation were entirely silent on the matter and they did not return my phone calls. Most disappointing indeed, Mr. MBE Chris Boardman. So I essentially threatened Halfords with legal action. As a consumer under UK legislation, I am protected from buying products which are free from defects. Okay, whenever you buy anything, whether it's a board game, a bicycle, or a torch, it should be sold to you free from defects. And if it isn't, the retailer is in breach of statute. And I told Halfords this. I was very polite when I told them. Halfords immediately, their response was to simply roll out their team of lawyers, and they said they would challenge any legal attempt that I made against them. Well, fair enough, I thought. Let's bring it the fuck on. A year later, because this is how long things take in this kingdom of ours, this United Kingdom. A year later, it was little old me versus big old bastard them. And I saw them in court, and I had my day in court. And who do you think won? Of course, I pissed all over them. It wasn't difficult. I had no legal training whatsoever, but it wasn't difficult. Against a team of legal advisors, I had my day and I won. I was a very happy chappy, as you can imagine, all right? Now, this is the same Road Team Carbon that I mentioned earlier. This is the same bicycle, again with the rear 100mm rear wheel, but simply because I didn't want any association with high and mighty Chris Boardman MBE, and because I didn't want any association with Halfords once I won the case in court, I simply had my bike painted. I had it all stealthed up, and I think it looks rather spiffing, don't you know? I fell in love with it all over again. In fact, not long after that picture was taken, that's me on a sportive on that very same bicycle. I was a well happy chappy indeed. And I think it was about a month after that photo was taken, I hit the speed of 50 miles an hour. Yes, I was going downhill. Yes, I was cheating. But to be fair, I was well chuffed. You know, I'm getting on in years. Hitting 50 miles an hour, I was well chuffed with. And I'm just going to mention this again. On this bicycle I hit 49 point something, I can't quite remember, but for all intents and purposes 50 mph. The following weekend, after I hit that amazing half century, it was a late summer morning, I think it was a Sunday morning, and I felt pretty confident. I went out for a solo spin by myself and I came across a small gradient. Now, I'm one of these cyclists that always remains seated when he climbs a hill, okay? I'm not like you see on the Tour de France, you know, these guys that get out and dance all over the pedals and throw the bicycle from side to side. I normally sit on the saddle, but on this particular morning, I thought I'd give it a bit of welly. And I got out of the saddle. And on the third rotation of the crank, there was a muffled crack, a muffled pop, and it was pretty much game over. All right. I vaguely remember falling through the air and my head hit the tarmac and I was knocked out for about 2 minutes, minute and a half, 2 minutes. The front of the bicycle had collapsed beneath me. Although I was cycling in the countryside when this happened, luckily for me, I just this second cycled past a large detached house. And the owner, she was mowing her lawn. She heard the bike collapse. She heard the bike skittle across the floor as it collapsed and broke into parts. Luckily for me, I had an independent witness that saw everything. What you can see on screen now is not a picture of my bicycle, but it is a picture of the type of bicycle that I bought. What you can see here is someone else's Chris Boardman Road Team Carbon road bike. My mouse isn't showing on screen, I don't think, but if you can imagine, or if you can see on the screen there, the front fork, it goes up and it tapers into a steerer tube, okay? After about 1.5 inches, you can see that that steerer tube has collapsed, all right? And that's very, very important. This isn't my bicycle. It's some other poor schmuck's bicycle, okay, that I just managed to find on Google when I was putting this video together. This is key. What you can see now on the right-hand side is my bicycle, the stealthed up fork that I spoke about earlier. And what you can see is the exact same point of failure. But also what you can see on screen, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and everything in between, is a manufacturing remnant. What looks like a bit of polythene, plastic polythene, is what's known as a bladder, or part of the bladder. These are left in to form the carbon at the manufacturing stage of building a bicycle over in China. The diameter of a steerer tube, a carbon fibre steerer tube, is very, very thin. And you can imagine that this defect, this manufacturing remnant that had been left in there due to appalling QA and appalling quality control, has significantly affected the structural integrity of that steerer tube. And on the third rotation of my crank, when I was leaning that bike over to power myself up that little gradient, that bicycle instantly collapsed beneath me. I remind you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that a week earlier I was doing 50 miles an hour on this bicycle, okay? 50 fucking miles an hour. And you can imagine the vertical stress that those forks would have been under at 50 miles an hour, what with the bumps on the road and that kind of thing. It's a miracle, not that I believe in God, but I'm going to use the word miracle, that I wasn't killed. And it's not until these kind of things happen to you that you take a reality check. And I'm going to again just dwell on this moment, if you don't mind. I'm going to tell you that my Boardman bicycle was in pristine tip-top condition. I'd had it for about a year, I think, give or take. It's going back a few years now. I'd had that bicycle for about a year. It was in better condition than my motor car. I'd had it serviced twice. I only ever took it out when it was dry. I never took it out when it was raining if I could help it. It was in immaculate condition. But because this manufacturing defect that you can see here was on the inside of the steerer tube, even if that handlebar would have been taken off and the fork examined during maintenance, it wouldn't have been spotted because it was an interior or an internal remnant, okay? So you do not know, even if your bicycle, your carbon bike, is in pristine condition, you cannot guarantee that it's not going to collapse beneath you. I was fucking furious. I had obviously a bicycle that was in pristine condition that had nearly killed me. I contacted Boardman again for the second time because of that word there. I was furious with Chris Boardman that he nearly killed me buying one of his products. It's a load of bollocks, because for the second time, Chris Boardman MBE and his appalling company, not once did they return my phone call or return my communications. What you can see here is the helmet that saved me from probably getting a severe head injury, although I was knocked out when I fell off my bicycle when it collapsed beneath me. This helmet, as you can see, has pretty much fallen apart and taken the brunt of the impact. It didn't stop my back being significantly hurt and injured, and I was significantly hurt. I had a bad back injury as a result of this accident. For those morons that I see cycling without helmets, again, I repeat what I've just mentioned. You cannot guarantee that you're not going to fall off your bicycle. For fuck almighty's sake, wear a helmet. This time, because I was in so much discomfort, and because I was exhausted, I had no inclination of taking Halfords to court for a second time. It was such an open and shut case. I could have, but this time I saw a contract, or I saw a company, a solicitor advertising online called Rally, and I entered into contract with them because they said they were extremely experienced when it comes to cycling injuries and this type of thing. Let me just recap. Injury happened in broad daylight, there was an independent witness, and there was an obvious manufacturing defect. So a pity then that this competent, quote-unquote, team of lawyers that I entered into contract with, they were guilty of unjustified delays. Despite the fact that they only lived or were based a few hours away from my home, at no point was there a home visit. Well over 4 fucking years later, the case was still ongoing. The report that they commissioned to look into the structural failure of the carbon fibre steerer was that incompetent that even myself as a layperson was able to shoot holes all the way through it. Despite the fact that I had employed a legal advisor, I ignored that advice on numerous occasions, and on each occasion I was proven entirely justified in doing so. I contacted the legal ombudsman. Unfortunately, incredibly, their investigation was entirely inadequate. They came to an erroneous conclusion because of that flawed investigation. I pointed this out to them. They stopped sending me emails with a name at the bottom of it. For example, Joe Bloggs. Joe Bloggs then started to remove his name from the emails, and essentially I just had a few anonymous emails in response to my communications, but essentially within a short amount of time all my communications were ignored by the legal ombudsman because they knew they'd fucked up big stuff. So thank you for that, legal ombudsman. Big fail indeed. I did a bit of research, Adam and Eve it. It's quite apparent to me now that solicitors themselves help fund the ombudsman. So impartiality goes straight out of the window. Welcome to modern living in the United Kingdom. A little bit pissed off. Ironically, I then immediately threatened my lawyer with legal action for breach of contract. They quickly picked their socks up. Halfords, again, rinse and repeat. They were threatened with legal action, but they declined. They settled with me out of court because they didn't want their name in the press because of this appalling breach of their duty of care to me. So they settled out of court. I still cycle. I still cycle a lot. This is my new bicycle. A few years old now, but it's a titanium bicycle from a company called Spin Industries. Ride Full Gas is their website. What a lovely bunch of people. I spent so much money on this. I saved up for month after month after month. This was the most expensive bicycle I could afford. And what you can see here is not only a titanium frame, it's got titanium seat post, titanium stem. I saved up and spent a lot of money on NV 2.0 carbon forks. It's difficult not to bling a bicycle without, attaching a carbon fork to it. I can tell you now that NV, their QA, leaves nothing to be desired. The spin 50mm deep section wheels that you can see there, again provided by the same company that sold me the bicycle. It was proven to me categorically at point of sale, and I'm not going to go into any details, but these wheels were proven to me as being bomb-proof. And I can tell you, after several years of riding this bicycle over every possible pothole in this country, those wheels are as true today as when I first bought them. And kudos indeed to the company that makes them. As I say, I'm still into cycling. That's my Brompton. It's a steel bicycle. Metal through and through, not a piece of carbon fibre anywhere. And that's my commuter. Aluminium, not a piece of carbon fibre anywhere. And I think I'm going to show you now a quick 30-second video of me riding my titanium road bike. Okay, so that just sort of proves that I am still a cyclist, but I'm not the cyclist I used to be. I used to cycle about 5,500 miles a year, 6,000 miles a year maybe. I barely do 1,500 at the moment, because it sounds ridiculous, and I'm not over-egging this, but I could have been killed at 50 miles an hour because of this appalling piece of shit bicycle that I bought. It affects you in a big way, it really does, and I'm going to end this overlong video, I apologise, with another screenshot of that steerer that collapsed under me. It's a small world we live in. It's a very small world indeed. And I'm going to finish by telling you that a few months ago I sold something on, it's not eBay, it's an application called Shpock. I don't know if you've heard of it. But basically it's like eBay, but they don't charge 10%, basically. I sold, I think it was a Brooks saddle on Shpock, and someone came around to the house and bought it, and we got talking. He was a nice chap. Small world. It turns out he used to work for Halfords as a senior QA manager, very senior QA manager. I thought that Halfords were unaware of these defects. It's incredible, but this guy told me, I'm not going to tell you his name, he was a lovely chap, I'm not going to drop his name to anyone. But he told me that Halfords were perfectly aware of the defects with these bicycles. But of course, it was probably beneficial to them not to go through the expense of a product recall, simply to pay out the odd no-win, no-fee injury claim. Wear a lid. Bye-bye.